Okay, welcome folks to part 2 of our 2-point perspective assignment. So in part 1 we'll just have a little recap. We covered some basic principles for 2-point perspective. There were a few little techniques as well that we could use and take advantage of in order to divide the space up equally and unequally with irregular divisions. So we looked at all of those things there, and then I got you all to do a 2-point freehand drawing of the reference images that I sent through to you, which you all did an exceptionally good job with. Actually, the 2-point was spot on with all the drawings I saw, so that's going to put us in really good stead for this second part. So the second part is really just going to introduce. It's not going to be too long a video. I don't want to complicate things too much, but it's just going to introduce a little technique of setting up a perspective guide using a limited amount of space. It has some drawbacks. Obviously the benefit is we can work with larger images following 2-point perspective guidelines, whereas if we were working on an image of a similar scale but relating it to a full horizon setup, then we're going to be looking at having to use an inordinate amount of space, so a really large working area. So I would always recommend doing that if you can, because the drawback with this is we don't get to use some of those techniques and principles of that we discussed in the previous session, because they have to be related to a vanishing point on the horizon or the horizon itself. So we're still going to work with the horizon in this, but it's going to be truncated. So we're not going to see our vanishing points because they would be so far off the paper in an image of a certain scale. So some of those things that we looked at were, if I just recap here, is we had, say we have a wall going back here, so this is one vanishing point over here, another one over here, say about there. We looked at having vertical lines which would allow us to divide space using a vertical. So if I had a shape here, if you need to refer back to part 1 for this, you can, and then I would take this diagonal, and where that would meet this horizon, this line here coming off the horizon, would be the vanishing point for all of those diagonals for that particular shape. Okay, so you can see just how much space we need for that in order to do that. And also, I mean, if you can see that this is quite small on this A4 sheet of paper, but if I were to enlarge this by, say, 4 or 5 times, the distance from this middle of the building here, this corner, to this vanishing point and this vanishing point would be then multiplied by a similar amount. So if this is 5 times longer or higher, then this distance would be 5 times wider across here. So you can just see how much space you are going to need to do that if you're working with a larger image. So like I say, I would always recommend doing that if you can, because we can take advantage of diagonal vanishing points, multiple vanishing points, and these vanishing points off the horizon line on a vertical. So there is a huge benefit to that. So I would say really, if you're looking at doing that, if you've got a kitchen table or a nice ample amount of space, to have a sheet of A1 cartridge paper or just some cheap paper. Anything would do really, as long as you can draw on it and make marks on it and see those marks clearly. To have something A1 size and then to be working A3 size on your actual drawing, and within that A3 framework maybe the picture plane might be a little bit smaller than A3, so that will give you ample space either side and above and below to fully establish your framework. But for this exercise we're going to just look at, I'm going to introduce you to a very truncated kind of nice little technique which allows us to work within a confined amount of space. And then so I want you to use this technique, redraw what you've the image from the reference that you've already drawn previously freehand, but using this approach. Excuse me, a bit of a frog in my throat. And then on Friday I'll work that up as well. I'll do using the same approach and technique. I'll work that up, have a finished drawing ready for Friday, paint that up, and then send a video out where we're just going to put some basic washes on there and just render it out a little bit, render the image out. Maybe make some of the lines a bit more irregular and a bit more natural rather than too kind of linear and geometric. But for the purposes of the initial drawing, I do want you to use a straight edge, so a ruler, set squares useful, just to learn the technique really, and the approach. And as I say, on the Friday we can just make those lines a little bit more organic and natural, so not too technical. We just humanize it a little bit more. Okay, so I got you all to do thumbnails. Now thumbnails in this particular method are very important and very useful because it allows us to actually see the full horizon line and the vanishing points, because we're working on a very small scale. So if I go to the image that we were working from, so this one here, I'm just going to, just by eye, as you've all done previously, just do a little thumbnail here, just eyeballing the angle changes of each face of the building. And this one is pretty much a 45-45 split perspective, which means that both vanishing points are going to be an equal distance away from this leading edge of the building. Both vanishing points will be an equal distance away. So we're always working within 90 degrees for our perspective drawings. So in this case it's going to be a 45-degree split. So that's our centre. One vanishing point will be that distance away, the other one will be that distance away, so we end up with, we're seeing the same amount of both sides of the building. Okay, but we can have other splits. We can have 80-20, 80-10, sorry, 70-20, 60-30, etc. Okay. But I actually do think this drawing is pretty close to a 45-45, thereabouts. Okay, so we've got a little thumbnail gesture drawing in there, and now I can establish where the horizon is, because the horizon is not visible in the image. So I can establish exactly where that horizon is just by drawing this line, taking it straight off, continuing that down, and then taking this one and bringing that up. Okay, and where the 2 points converge, that's going to be the vanishing point for that side on the horizon. Okay, I don't think I've got enough room on this side to actually do the same, but it's exactly the same principle. Yeah, not quite, it's just going off. But basically, just where those 2 points converge, I just want to do a horizontal line completely horizontal, through there, and that shows me where my horizon line would be. Okay, so now when I come to enlarge it onto this paper, I can refer to this, and I know the horizon's about, I've got 1, 2, so yeah, it's maybe, it goes in again, and then there's another perhaps half of this distance above that. Okay, so we can now go in. Excuse me, sorry, real frog in my throat. So now we can go in and just establish that. So what we want to do is, obviously referring to your thumbnail, if you keep it to one side, I'm going to determine the height of this, and I'm going to make this about 20 centimeters tall. Okay, so you'll see the reason. Try to go for a round measurement rather than you know, kind of 10.3 or 10.6. Try to round it off to the nearest whole unit, because we're going to divide this line down, and you'll see why in a moment. So I'm just going to take my vertical here. So this is the leading edge of the building. And I want to divide this into 10. So yeah, so we're going to make it 20 centimeters. So these are going to be, actually, we'll divide this into 20. So that's 20 centimeters. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think we've got 20 there. Yep, there we go, we've got 20, so I just draw a straight line down. So that's that side now, divided into 20 centimeter increments. Okay, so this is now where we refer back to our thumbnail. We're just going to reproduce these angles here. So I really should be referring to the reference as well as my thumbnail. If you've been accurate enough with your thumbnail, then that's good. You want to spend a bit of time just making sure you get those angles correct. Okay, so let's take these lines as far as we can, you know, within our working area. Okay, so now, if I could just find my other ruler, bear with me a moment, folks. So now I want to, again, have a nice round measurement here. The building doesn't come out this far, but I'm looking at a convergence point of, 10 centimeters would be good. But I still don't think I've got room for that. We shall see. So I'm just going to do one face of the building, just for the purposes of this demonstration, to not keep you too long. The same applies to the other side of the face. So, oh yeah, not quite 10, which is unfortunate. So if we go for 15 instead. So I'm just going to go to the point where it's 15 centimeters. Make sure, obviously, it's you might want to measure from your edge of your paper so you've got a straight line Again, I'm just doing this just for speed. So that's the line that's now 15 centimeters long. So, oh yeah, forgot to put our horizon line in. So we know the horizon line goes in actually if I were to divide from my horizon here down to the bottom, I'm just going to divide that in half. 2, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so I was right. So so we've got we need to divide this into fifths. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, that's pretty close. So 1, 2, and that's going to give me my horizon just there, roughly. I'm just going to put it a little bit below that. Okay, so now I can draw the horizon line in. Again, with this method, the horizon actually is not too essential. Because as I say, we're not going to see our vanishing points on the horizon. Okay, so now we've got this length here, so we just need to divide 15 centimeters by 20. So bear with me a second. So yeah, so 15 divided by 20 gives us 0.75. So 0.75 or 7.5 millimeters, which is a little bit awkward to use as a unit for this purpose. Obviously the benefits of having smaller and more increments here is that the guidelines that we put on, there's going to be more of them, so it's going to be easier to relate our parallels to those lines as they go back in space. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to actually have this as 10 instead, go for 2 centimeter increments, so that's 10, and then obviously I've got 15 centimeters there, so we're looking at 1.5 centimeters coming down. And I really can't see a thing on that ruler. So let's just come down here. So we just want to divide this into 10, 1.5 centimeters. So there we are. So we do the same for both sides of the building, obviously. I'm just doing this one side. So now I'm just going to connect these lines, these increment divisions, and go straight across back over there. Now I know that there's a sign that comes out on this side, so I'm also going to take this line across over here as well. So you want to keep these guidelines as light as you can, just so you can see them. But yes, don't be too heavy with these lines. I'm just probably pressing a little bit harder just so you guys can see on camera. Okay, so again, I mean, it would be more beneficial to divide these in half again and do the 20 increments. That will give us more lines and a more accurate basis to refer to. But again, just for brevity and just to keep this to a minimal amount of time, because this really is just a very simple setup, we'll stick to this. Okay, so now I can come in, and remember we just put this line this far out just so we had a round measurement to break it down into our units of 10. But now I'm going to bring the building into where it needs to be on this side. So it's about there. Again, this is all eyeballing. Make sure obviously this line is straight, which it completely isn't there. Sorry, this ruler is insanely long, so as you all know, I've reported that to you before, so it's very long. Okay, so this is the end of the building here. This is our front edge, and this side of the building is narrower. We're seeing less of this. Okay, so I mean, I might still be a bit wide with that, but again, it's just an approximation. Okay, so that's essentially it, folks. You're now just drawing everything on one face and working within these lines, perspective lines. So let's just go in and just do a little bit here. So we've got some guttering up the top here. There's a pylon of some sort coming up here. Again, this line would follow that. Then we have some. Let's just strengthen this line here a little bit so we can see this edge. So that's the edge of that building. So then we have some tarpaulin coming in, or some corrugated iron or something there. So it comes in about that far. So this is where we now switch to being kind of a bit more observational with our measurements and distances. So I'd say it comes down about that far. You can take measurements from here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's about a quarter of the distance here. So 1, 2, 3. So it's a bit too low down there, so it needs to go a bit higher up. So always make sure you can see the line that you're working within here. Let's just take that there, about there. And we have an edge of the building here. And then that edge actually comes all the way down. Then just measure up there. 1, 2. It's about a third actually. So the top of this canopy here to the top of these windows to then up to here is about a third. So I can just come up a third here. One, two. It's not quite a third. I'd say my third's about here. So this, actually the top of that canopy I would say is pretty much horizontal. So I'm going to actually put that on the horizon line. Sorry, just lost track of where my horizon is. Where is my horizon? Oh, just here. Okay, so let's just put the canopy just there. It comes right out from the building. So that's coming out kind of at this kind of angle over here. And then we have these doors just inside here, or panels, sorry. So remember, we can now, one of the things we can still use is our diagonals to find equal divisions. So that's the top of the canopy there. Let's just come down and get the bottom. So let's just use this line here. So that's the bottom of our canopy, and then I've got these panels just inside here. So again, that's, like I say, that's where we can use our diagonals, because they're all pretty much equal in width, pretty much. So I can just go across from diagonal to diagonal. Remember, our X marks the spot. Sorry, I've got to get rid of this ruler, it's just way too long. So diagonal to diagonal, which gives us the centre. Remember then, if I go through this point here, the halfway point just there, hope you can see that there, and the halfway point here, okay, that will give us half of the width of that. So can we just come down vertically and then go from here now through here. So just dividing that space up, so that now gives us the same as this now, but pushed back in space. And we just keep going on down through here, just dividing that up. I could also come down from the other side just to be a bit more accurate with this, as I did here, but again, I'm just trying to speed this process up for you all. Make sure your lines are completely vertical, which mine are not quite. Okay, so we just divided that space up, and the same can be done for the windows up here. I can just, we establish the size of one of the windows. So yeah, further down the line I will go into a bit more detail in perspective, maybe have that as a little course that you can purchase separately, and that will go into a bit more depth on how we can transfer measurements off of measure bars and stuff. So it's a bit more involved, a bit more technical, but that will be there for you guys to purchase if you wish, if you're interested in exploring perspective in a bit more detail. So this gives me the center, which in this case there is a center to that. Now I'll go across here, and then I'm going to come up there just to find the halfway point. Just follow these windows all the way across. Sorry. So that's halfway, but then I want to divide this in half again. So again, always finding the halfway point, just corner to corner. And I have half of that. That's the distance between the two windows. Okay. Half there. Oh yeah, I can go across here then find the other side of that half. Just double check what I'm doing here. So that gave us half. Yeah, that should be right. Just there. That gives another. Okay, so we've got the one window here. That distance between, and then we just come up one more time here. So that now this becomes our second window just there. Okay, so it's just a question of just spending a bit of time, just make sure everything. Okay, so these should be the same size, pretty much, if you're being careful, which I probably haven't been actually. I probably made a bit of a mistake there, but I think you get the idea. You just need to spend a little time and just think about what you're doing with these. Yeah, so it's a little bit wider than it should be, because I tried to approximate that division between the two. But yeah, you can do that. It's perfectly doable. You just have to, like I say, spend a little bit of time thinking about what you're doing before you commit. But it's all really about just dividing spaces up. I mean, I could divide this really into lots of increments and then go in and decide where, you know, equal kind of rectangles, and I can make them smaller, the divisions, and then I can just go in and decide where I want the windows to be and make sure they're the same size, and determine whatever I feel is the right distance between the two. Okay, so here we have that one panel just there, and then our second panel is here. Third panel there, and finally a doorway just over here in between those two somewhere, a bit narrower. Okay, so really then it's just a question of using a combination of your ruler. You can freehand some of it if you want. As I said, this sign over here does come off parallel to this facing side, so I can just draw that in. So it comes out about that far. And then obviously if we'd established all the guidelines on this side of that would follow those guidelines down. Okay, so hopefully you get the idea there, everyone. So keep these lines nice and light, and then I want you to go in and just be very accurate with the drawing then of all of the smaller details and everything. So we've got this nice guideline framework to work within to guide us to make sure everything's going the right way and conforming to that 2-point perspective. But then we can go in and you can freehand some of this, but then maybe go over with a ruler perhaps afterwards. Okay, so this sign is actually a lot steeper in the image, so that just means that I probably placed my horizon a little bit too high. I think it probably could have come down a little bit so that these lines would then be a bit steeper. Okay, but that's just where you really need to just utilize that thumbnail, make sure that your basic shape you put in before you divide it up is as correct as you can get it. And then again we have something coming out from there and here. That goes into this. Okay. We have a vertical down there for this post, etc., etc. Okay, and there are going to be areas as well. I mean, we've got the line on this side, just below that sign's coming down there. Again, if I'd drawn my guidelines in on this side of the building, you know, divided it up over there, then I'd be able to get this a bit more accurate on this side. There's a window then there beneath that. And then we have an example of something that's slightly at a different angle. So this panel here, this sign, but the top of it is actually pretty parallel to everything else on this facing side, so again that can just be drawn parallel if we have those guidelines in, and comes right out to the beyond that side of the building and then down. Okay, so it's pretty simple. We're just using a combination of our dividing space using the center line. We've divided we've taken a thumbnail, enlarged that up, reproduced that at a larger scale, then divided this leading edge into increments. Again, the more increments you have, the more divisions you have, the more accurate you can be with your lines as you place them on. I mean, some perspective setups you'll see have kind of tons and tons of lines. You can't quite see that, but lots of divisions just to be a bit more accurate. But I think, you know, you all did so well with your freehand drawing. I think just fewer divisions and just working, it gives you a nice general guide for how the direction that everything should be going. Remember, any lines that are on the horizon are going to be horizontal, any above are going to be going down this way, any below are going to be going up that way towards the horizon. But that's where this guide comes in so useful. It just it takes care of a lot of that. So, and you can just see, like I say, it's just really going down to the simplest details, just using observation then to do a nice clean line drawing. That's what I'm looking for. So a nice clean line drawing. Make sure you keep your lines light. You should be able to tap out with a putty rubber to make those less visible when we come to do the rendering. I shouldn't really be working on this face because I haven't put any guidelines in, but there we are. So again, we've got like a bin coming out here, a road sign about here. Okay, so remember your ellipses you can put inside rectangles as well, so if you have an ellipse, we just draw a rectangle that follows and conforms to this perspective guide, corner it to find the centre point, and then I can go in and draw my ellipse inside there. Okay, so that's going to come in useful for elliptical objects and round objects, and the bikes as well. So the bikes can be related to this side. We can draw a rectangle for the front wheel of this bike here, so let's say it's about that high, about that wide, so I can go in, find the centre there, and draw my ellipse in for that front bike wheel. Okay, so then that also gives me the centre then here. We'd have maybe a division of about that much between it. Another rectangle, and that's the rear wheel there then. So again, another ellipse in. Okay, so hopefully you've all found that very quite useful. It's a nice, like I said, it's a nice space-saving device when you don't have a vast amount of room. But as I also said, always ideal if you can work with a full setup. So you've got your full horizon line with the vanishing points on there, so you can take advantage of things like the vertical vanishing points off the horizon, diagonal vanishing points, and remember we also covered special vanishing points, so that was irregular shapes that aren't squares, so rectangular shapes that have their own vanishing point on the horizon, so you can reproduce that same shape across your image. Okay, so good luck with that everyone. Look forward to seeing your final line drawings, nice and detailed. As I say, I mean, we've got some typography here. Really, I want you to put in as much information, as detail as you can, just using that framework as your guide. Okay, so you can see we get loads of information and detail in. We've got these kind of panels here. I can see that my perspective's not quite. Oh, actually, yeah, we haven't done that side, have we? So, oh yeah, so that would be coming down this way, and then we've got all these kind of tiles or shingles, wherever, all a bit irregular. So again, just go in there, all referring to your perspective lines. And just put in, you know, they're all different sizes. Okay, so this is going to be quite involved drawing to really flesh it all out. So you've got this initial setup stage for the guidelines, and then the real meat and potatoes of the rest of the drawing is just really being very observational and really taking care to reproduce all the details that you see on the surface. Okay, just keep it nice and clean, nice and linear, and that's it, folks. Okay, so take care, and I'll get the next video out where we're going to put a little bit of colour onto this. I'll finish this drawing up, put a little bit of colour on some washes, get that out to you all Friday evening. But in the meantime, good luck with this. If you have the time to get it done, that's great. If not, you'll still have the video on Friday for the rendering side of things, so just come to it and do it as and when you can. Okay, alright, take care folks.